There is no funeral for Chicley. There is barely a name. In a single episode in the 4th season of Adventure Time, a gum person stands in Princess Bubblegum's laboratory, a willing test subject, and then he is changed into something simpler and rounder and browner, and the show gives him a new name, and it moves on. The character who used to be Chicley becomes a candy person named Crunchy. Nobody mourns the version that existed before. Nobody even acknowledges that a version existed before. The show does not slow down. It does not add music. It does not hold on the moment to tell you that a person has just been quietly overwritten. It simply continues, because in the land of ooh, this is not a tragedy. This is maintenance. That absence, the missing funeral, the missing acknowledgement, the missing pause where grief should be, is the subject of this video. Adventure Time is a show about a world that is constantly producing characters and constantly losing them, and the show treats both halves of that process as ordinary. New faces arrive. Old faces fade into the background and are never named again. And underneath the comedy and the color, there is a system at work. A quiet and relentless machine that keeps making replacements. The thesis of this video is simple to state and strange to sit with. Ooh is a cemetery of replacements. The land of Ooh keeps generating stand-ins, doubles, second versions, designated successors, and the cost of living in a world that can always make another one of you is that no single one of you is ever irreplaceable. To be forgotten in Ooh is not an accident. It is the price of being interchangeable. Welcome to Tome. You're going to want to get comfortable for this one because it goes deep and it goes slow. We are going to walk through the forgotten characters of Adventure Time, the ones the show introduced and then filed away, the ones it transformed and renamed, the ones it built specifically to be replaceable, and the ones it replaced. And by the end, the pattern underneath all of them should feel less like a collection of minor characters and more like a single quiet argument the show is making about what it means to be one face in a kingdom that can always make another. Let us get into it. Start with the moment that names the whole problem. You Made Me is Season 4, Episode 20. It aired on August 27th, 2012. On its surface, it is a lemon grab episode, a story about Princess Bubblegum trying to civilize the screaming, miserable creature she made and abandoned. But buried inside it is a smaller story that the show barely glances at. Princess Bubblegum has an aura visualizer, a machine she uses to read the inner state of candy people, and she runs a gum person through it as a demonstration. That gum person is Chicley. And in the larger story of the Candy Kingdom, which the show would not fully tell for years, Chicley is not just a test subject. He is a conspirator, one of the original candy people Princess Bubblegum created, alongside Gumball and Lolly, the family she made and then unmade. To understand what happens to Chicley, you have to jump forward to Season 9, to an episode called Bonnibel Bubblegum. It aired in 2017, and it is the episode that finally explains the origin of the Candy Kingdom. Princess Bubblegum, newly formed, lonely, with the power to create life out of candy biomass, made herself a family. She made an uncle, Gumball. She made an aunt, Lolly. She made a cousin, Chicley. She made a brother, Neddy. She wanted people. She made them the way you make anything, by deciding they should exist and then bringing them into being. And then the family she made decided they did not want to be ruled by the child who made them. Gumball, Lolly, and Chicley conspired to overthrow her. They formulated a poison, a substance the show calls Dum Dum Juice, designed to revert Bubblegum into something docile and simple, a candy person with no will and no memory of who she had been. Think about what that actually means. The first betrayal in the history of the Candy Kingdom is a plot to erase someone's mind and replace the person they are with a simpler, more manageable version. The weapon is not death, the weapon is reversion. And in the fight that follows, Bubblegum turns that same weapon back on the people who made it. She does not kill Gumball, Lolly, and Chicley. She does something the show treats as worse and frames as a joke. She splashes them with their own Dum Dum Juice. She erases them. She turns her uncle into a harmless, simple-minded punchbowl. She turns her aunt into a candy person with no memory of her schemes. And she turns Chicley, her cousin, the gum person who conspired against her, into a brown candy ball with a vacant smile and a new name. That new name is Crunchy. The thing you are watching in You Made Me, the unremarkable gum person standing in the aura visualizer years before any of this is explained, is the afterlife of a person. Crunchy is what is left when Chicley is subtracted. He has the same body, more or less. He has none of the memory, none of the ambition, none of the self that planned a coup. He is a person with the interior removed, walking around the Candy Kingdom as a background extra, toasting at the Candy Tavern, standing in crowds, existing as set dressing in the very kingdom he once tried to take. And the show never tells you, in the moment, that you are looking at a ghost. It just lets Crunchy be Crunchy. Cheerful, empty, replaced. This is the engine of the whole video, and it is worth stating plainly before we go any further. In Ooh, a person can be reduced to a simpler person, and the simpler person inherits the body and the social slot while losing the history. The continuity of the candy person Crunchy is the continuity of an object, not a self. And the show is not being subtle about what it is doing here, even if it is being quiet. It is showing you that in a world where minds can be poured out and refilled, identity is not sacred. It is a setting. It can be changed. The version of you that gets remembered is whichever version happens to be installed when someone is looking. And here is the detail that turns the system from sad to almost unbearable. In the Candy Kingdom, Crunchy is treated as a designated replacement. There is a moment, across the run of the show, and in the supporting material the writers built around it, where Crunchy is described as the new Cinnamon Bun. Cinnamon Bun is the original lovable, slightly broken candy person, the one who is undercooked and soft in the middle, the one who attends Princess Bubblegum and gets the comedic beats. When Cinnamon Bun leaves the Candy Kingdom to serve Flame Princess, the kingdom needs another character to occupy that exact emotional role, the sweet, dim, devoted candy citizen. And the role gets filled. Crunchy slides into the slot. The kingdom does not grieve the loss of Cinnamon Bun from the day-to-day. It simply produces a stand-in. Sit with that for a moment. The role survives. The person is interchangeable. A community in Ooh has a shape, a set of slots that need to be occupied, and when one occupant moves on, the slot does not stay empty. Someone else is moved into it, renamed if necessary, simplified if necessary. The Candy Kingdom does not miss Cinnamon Bun because the Candy Kingdom has Crunchy now, and Crunchy will do. That is not the behavior of a place that loves its individuals. That is the behavior of a place that loves its functions and treats individuals as the temporary things that perform them. Princess Bubblegum is the architect of this system, and you can see her relationship to her own people in the way the show frames her across the entire series. Too Young is Season 3, Episode 5. It establishes that Bubblegum was, for a stretch, biologically 13 years old, reverted by an accident and slowly regrowing her lost biomass. The show plays it for awkward comedy, the romance with Finn, the regency of the Earl of Lemongrab. But underneath it is the same idea the Candy Kingdom is built on. Bubblegum's age is a quantity of candy mass. She can lose it. She can regain it. Her body is a resource that can be reduced and replaced. And so, by extension, is everyone she made. She rules a kingdom of people who are, materially, the same substance she is. They are not her subjects in the way a human queen has subjects. They are her medium. And a ruler who sees her people as medium will, eventually, treat them as expendable in ways that should alarm you, and instead get framed as competence. Bubblegum experiments on candy people. She keeps the aura visualizer. She built Goliad, and when Goliad went wrong, she built Stormo to contain it. She built Lemongrab, and when Lemongrab went wrong, she built a second Lemongrab to keep him company, and that pairing went wrong too. Every solution Bubblegum reaches for is another created being. Her instinct, when faced with a flawed creation, is not to repair it. It is to make another one. The kingdom is a workshop, and the citizens are the output, and the output is endlessly revisable. Goliad is Season 4, Episode 10. Princess Bubblegum, worried about what happens to the Candy Kingdom after she's gone, decides to create an heir. She makes Goliad, a sphinx-like candy creature with psychic powers, and she tries to teach Goliad how to be a benevolent ruler. But Goliad learns the wrong lesson. Goliad watches Bubblegum exert control, and concludes that control is the point, that subjects exist to be dominated. So Bubblegum, having made a successor who came out wrong, makes another creature to neutralize the first. She combines her own DNA with Finn's to create Stormo, a second psychic being whose only purpose is to hold Goliad in a permanent telepathic standoff. The episode ends with the two of them locked together on a mountaintop, frozen in an eternal mental wrestling match. Think about what Bubblegum has actually done by the end of that episode. She wanted an heir. She made one. The one she made was a mistake. Rather than live with the mistake or unmake it, she made a second being whose entire existence is to cancel out the first. Two created lives, both conscious, both powerful, both now condemned to spend the rest of time staring into each other's minds on a rock, because the project that created them did not work, and the easier path was always to manufacture a counterweight rather than confront the failure. Goliad and Stormo are not villains. They are byproducts. They are what is left over when a god queen iterates on a design and leaves the failed drafts running. And the show, characteristically, does not go back to that mountaintop. No character brings it up again. Two minds, locked forever, simply removed from the story. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The Lemongrabs are the clearest, cruelest demonstration of the replacement machine, because the show actually lets you watch the cycle repeat. The Earl of Lemongrab is Bubblegum's first attempt at an heir, made too sour, too unstable, screaming and miserable from the moment of his creation. In You Made Me, Bubblegum tries to fix his loneliness by making him a second Lemongrab, an identical copy, so that he will have a companion exactly like himself. For a moment, it works. Two Lemongrabs, happy together, sharing a castle. But Too Old, Season 5, Episode 31, returns to that castle and shows you what the companionship became. One Lemongrab has grown fat and tyrannical. He keeps the candy people who serve him in misery, and he keeps the second Lemongrab, his identical brother, his cure for loneliness, locked in a dungeon, fed and dominated and reduced to a servant. The first Lemongrab eats the second Lemongrab. That is what happens. The companion that Bubblegum manufactured to solve a problem becomes food for the very creature he was made to comfort. And the show stages it as a horror beat wrapped in candy colors, a body absorbed into another body, a self consumed by the self it was copied from. The cure for loneliness, in Ooh, can be eaten. Because the cure for loneliness was never a person to the system that made him. He was a remedy. He was a unit of companionship, deployed to patch a defect in a previous unit, and when the previous unit decided to consume him, there was nothing in the structure of his existence to say that he mattered more than the function he was made to serve. All Your Fault, Season 5, Episode 9, deepens the Lemongrab horror by showing you what the surviving Lemongrab does with the kingdom he rules. He is starving, his candy citizens are starving, and to feed them he creates more life. Lemon children pulled from the walls of his castle, screaming into existence and immediately suffering. He makes people because he needs them to be something, raw material, labor, bodies. The lemon people are born into a world that has no use for them except as a resource. And Lemongrab, himself a failed heir, himself a replaceable draft, passes the logic of his own creation directly down to the beings he creates. The replaced becomes the replacer. The forgotten learns to forget. This is the part of the pattern that should stay with you. The system does not just produce victims, it reproduces itself through them. Lemongrab was made carelessly, abandoned, then handed subjects he treats exactly as carelessly. The machine that made him taught him how to make others. And so the cemetery of replacements is not a single graveyard with one gravedigger. It is a recursion. Every replaceable being who gains a little power immediately begins generating their own replaceable beings. Bubblegum makes Lemongrab. Lemongrab makes the lemon people. The candy biomass keeps becoming new candy people, and each new candy person is one more entity who can, in turn, be reverted, copied, consumed, or filed into the background and forgotten. Now turn from the manufactured to the introduced, because the cemetery of replacements has a second wing, and it is full of characters the show greeted with fanfare, and then quietly shelved. Susan Strong is Season 2, Episode 18. It aired on March 7th, 2011. Finn, who believes he may be the last human in Ooh, discovers an underground tribe of what appear to be humans, and among them is a large, powerful, silent woman he names Susan Strong. For Finn, this is enormous. This is the possibility that he is not alone, that there are others like him, that the loneliest fact of his existence might not be a fact at all. The episode treats Susan's arrival as a discovery with weight, and then the episode complicates her almost immediately. The humans, the tribe Susan belongs to, turn out to be fish people wearing hats, mutated descendants who call themselves humans without being human. Their hats come off and reveal what they actually are. All except Susan. Her hat stays on. She runs away without answering the question the entire episode has been asking, which is whether she is a real human or another creature performing the idea of one. The show introduces a character who might answer Finn's deepest loneliness, and then it withholds the answer and lets her disappear into the world, unresolved, for years. Susan returns in Buteopia, Season 3, Episode 14, and the show keeps the mystery running. She leads Finn and Jake and a group of Hayumans on a quest, and at a critical moment, a piece of technology on the back of her neck is revealed. A device, a designation. The suggestion that Susan is not simply a person, but something built or programmed or controlled. The fragments accumulate. A name that Finn gave her, not a name she chose. A hidden mechanism. A tribe of false humans. And still no answer. Susan Strong becomes one of the show's longest open questions, and the way the show treats that question is the point. It does not rush to resolve her. It does not even seem eager to remember her. She surfaces, she gestures at an answer, and she sinks back down. The show does eventually circle back, in the very last stretch of its run, to suggest that Susan was indeed a captured human, modified, her mind suppressed by the device on her neck, a person buried inside a controlled body. But by the time that suggestion arrives, Susan has spent the better part of a decade as a background figure, a recurring face with a teased history that the show kept declining to tell. Think about the shape of that. A character who represents the single most important possibility in Finn's emotional life, the possibility that he is not the last of his kind, is introduced with fanfare and then shelved, brought out occasionally to remind you the mystery exists, and never made central. The tragedy of Susan Strong is not that she is anonymous. It is that she is the opposite of anonymous. She is loaded with meaning, and the show files her in the background anyway. That is the second kind of forgetting, and it may be the more painful one. To be a numbered candy person, a face in the crowd with no name, is one form of erasure. But to be Susan Strong, to carry an entire thematic payload, to be the answer to the protagonist's loneliness, and to be shelved regardless, is a different and stranger kind. The show is telling you that meaning does not protect you from being forgotten. Importance is not a shield. A character can matter enormously to the emotional architecture of the series, and still spend most of the series standing in the back of the frame, waiting for a return that mostly does not come. Compare Susan to a character who was forgotten in the gentlest possible way, and then resurrected into something the show actually loved. Tree Trunks is Season 1, Episode 4. It aired on April 12th, 2010, near the very beginning of the series. In her own first episode, Tree Trunks is barely a character at all. She is a sweet, elderly elephant who wants to bake an apple pie and goes on a small, dangerous quest to find a crystal apple. And the episode is a minor, low-stakes adventure. She appears before that, glimpsed in the opening sequence, present in the world as set dressing. One more inhabitant of Ooo with no interiority and no arc. For a long stretch of the show, Tree Trunks is exactly the kind of character who gets forgotten. Pleasant, peripheral, easy to skip. And then the show does something it rarely does. It remembers her, and it decides she is worth deepening. Crystals Have Power, Season 2, Episode 8, and later episodes begin to build Tree Trunks out, giving her relationships, a marriage to Mr. Pig, eventually a child. The character who started as background apple pie comedy becomes a figure with a domestic life, a history, a place in the emotional map of the show. Tree Trunks is the counterexample that proves the rule. Most peripheral characters in Ooo stay peripheral. They are introduced and shelved and forgotten. Tree Trunks is one of the few the show reached back for, and the fact that her rescue from the background is so noticeable, so unusual, tells you how many characters never got it. Because for every Tree Trunks, there are 100 candy people with no names at all. The Adventure Time Wiki, the meticulous fan archive that tracks every detail of the show, catalogs anonymous background candy citizens by number. Candy Person 1, Candy Person 102, Candy Person 104. These are not jokes invented by fans. These are real, recurring figures who appear in crowd scenes across the series, distinct enough to be tracked, present enough to be counted, and yet never given a name by the show itself. They are identified by index. They are people the way entries in a spreadsheet are people. They exist, they populate the kingdom, they make the Candy Kingdom feel inhabited, and the show that made them never once stops to call any of them anything. Candy Streets, Season 5, Episode 25, is a detective episode set entirely among these background candy people, and it is one of the few times the show points its camera at the citizens it usually treats as wallpaper. Jake plays a noir detective investigating a theft, moving through a candy kingdom populated by the named but minor and the unnamed entirely. Root Beer Guy, Manfred the Talking Pinata, Pep Butt, Starchy. For one episode, the background becomes the foreground, and you get to see that these figures have lives, routines, jobs, small dramas, and then the episode ends, and the camera pulls back up to Finn and Jake and the principals and the candy people, sink back into the crowd where the show keeps them. Root Beer Guy, Season 5, Episode 43, is the most devastating version of this, because the show takes a single background candy person, gives him a complete interior life for 22 minutes, and then ends him. Root Beer Guy is a banana guard, a frustrated would-be novelist married to a wife who does not respect him, working a job he finds meaningless. The episode lets you fully inhabit his disappointment, his small ambitions, his desire to matter. He stumbles into a real adventure, helps save Princess Bubblegum, finally becomes the hero of his own story. And at the end of the episode, he dies. He is killed, and his death is quiet. And the show treats it with a strange, gentle finality, and then he is gone. What the show is doing in Root Beer Guy is showing you, deliberately, the cost of its own structure. For one episode, it pulls a single anonymous citizen out of the crowd and proves that he was a complete person the entire time, with a full inner world the show simply was not looking at. And then it puts him back, permanently, by killing him. The message is hard to miss once you see it. Every candy person in every crowd scene is a Root Beer Guy. Every numbered citizen has an inner life of exactly this density. The show cannot tell all of their stories. It can only tell one, occasionally, as a kind of confession. And the confession is that all the others are just as real and will never be witnessed. This needs to be stated plainly. The forgotten characters of Adventure Time are not a writing oversight. They are a designed feature of a world built on the premise that life is cheap to produce and therefore cheap to lose. The Candy Kingdom is a monument to manufactured life. Bubblegum can make people out of candy. So there are always more people. And when there are always more people, no individual person carries the weight that a person carries in a world where life is scarce. The numbered candy citizens are the logical end of Bubblegum's gift. She can make life endlessly, so life becomes endless, and therefore disposable. And the kingdom fills with beings who are real and unwitnessed and replaceable all at once. The Suda, Season 5, Episode 21, gives this its quiet emotional center through a candy person named Braco. Braco is desperately, hopelessly in love with Princess Bubblegum, and he keeps trying to court her, and she keeps having no interest. Eventually, Peppermint Butler helps Braco transform himself, through effort and a magic potion, into a confident, handsome version of himself called Bravo. And here is the turn. Once Braco becomes Bravo, once he becomes the better, more impressive version, Bubblegum starts to notice him, and a different candy person, a woman who loved Braco as he actually was, steps forward. The episode ends with Bravo realizing that the person who loved the original him is the one worth choosing. But look at what the episode quietly establishes about the kingdom. Self-improvement, in Ooh, is literally self-replacement. Braco does not grow into Bravo. He transforms into him, swaps the old self for a new and better marketed self, and the old Braco effectively ceases to be. The happy ending is built on the premise that you can become a different person to be loved, and the only correction the episode offers is that someone should love you before the swap. The machinery of replacement is so deep in the world that even a love story runs on it. You are never quite irreplaceable, not even to yourself. You can always be revised into something more lovable, and the only question is whether anyone remembers the draft. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now we reach the version of this idea that the show takes most seriously, the version where the replaced self does not stay quiet, does not stay grateful, does not slide gently into the background. Reboot is Season 8, Episode 13. At the end of it, a new character is born, and his birth is the most explicit statement the entire series ever makes about the discarded self. His name is Fern, and he is made from the parts of Finn that Finn left behind. To understand Fern, you have to go back to the grass sword. Across the later seasons, Finn carries a sword made of cursed grass, bonded to his arm, alive in a way swords should not be. And in the deep, strange episode The Hall of Egress, Season 7, Episode 24, the show plays games with Finn's perception and identity, blindfolds and loops and the dissolution of the self, the kind of episode where you are never sure which version of the scene is real. The grass and the sword and Finn's sense of who he is have been entangled for a long time. Finn's discarded selves, his lost arm, his cursed weapons, his alternate timelines accumulate around him like sediment. He is a character who keeps shedding versions of himself. In Reboot, the cracked remains of Finn's old sword, the Finn sword, and the cursed grass sword merge together. The merge is given form by a being called the Grassy Wizard, and what crawls out of that merger is Fern, a grass creature with Finn's face, Finn's memories, Finn's sense of being the hero of the story. Fern believes, for a time, that he is Finn. He has the interior of Finn. He has the self-image of Finn. And he is, in the most literal possible sense, the part of Finn that got left over. He is Finn's discarded material, assembled into a person, waking up to discover that the original is still walking around living the life that Fern feels should be his. Two Swords, Season 8, Episode 14, lets you sit inside Fern's horror. He looks like Finn. He remembers being Finn. But there is already a Finn, the real one, the one with the body and the friends and the history that continues uninterrupted. Fern is the copy who arrived too late to be the original, and the show does not treat that as a minor inconvenience. It treats it as the deepest kind of dispossession. Fern did not lose a thing he owned. He lost the claim to being himself. Everything that makes him feel like a person, the memories, the heroism, the identity, belongs by prior right to someone else. He is the replacement who can never replace, because the original refuses to vacate. Do No Harm, Season 8, Episode 15, and the episodes around Fern's arc show his resentment curdling into something tragic. Fern cannot build a life as Finn, because Finn exists. He cannot build a life as not Finn, because being Finn is all he knows how to be. He is poisoned, slowly, by the grass nature he is made of, his body decaying even as his sense of self refuses to resolve. He turns against Finn out of a grief he cannot name, the grief of being the version that did not get to be the real one. And the show stages this with real patience. Fern is not a simple villain. He is the discarded self, given just enough consciousness to understand exactly what he has been discarded from. By the time the series finale, Come Along With Me, arrives on September 3rd, 2018, Fern's arc resolves into something quietly merciful. Fern, dying, ruined, finally gets to do one meaningful thing, one act that is genuinely his and not a copy of Finn's, and in doing it, he is allowed to rest. From his remains, a small tree grows, and Finn carries a seed of it, and there is the faint suggestion of a Finn sword regrowing, the cycle of discarded selves beginning again even at the end. But the emotional core is that Fern, the replacement, the leftover, the copy who arrived too late, is finally seen as a person in his own right in the moment he stops trying to be Finn. The discarded self gets witnessed exactly once, at the very end, and then he is gone. Fern is the thesis of this video made flesh, so it is worth slowing all the way down here. Everything we have talked about, the reverted Chicla, the consumed second Lemongrab, the shelved Susan, the numbered candy people, the swapped out Braco, all of it is the cemetery of replacements seen from the outside, the world calmly producing and discarding. Fern is that same process seen from the inside. He is what it feels like to be the version that got left behind, to wake up knowing you are made of someone else's cast-offs, to want a life that has already been claimed by the one you were copied from. The show spends one minor character after another showing you replacement as an event. With Fern, it finally shows you replacement as an experience. And the show had been rehearsing this idea for years. In episodes, you might not connect to Fern at all. The Real You, Season 2, Episode 15, is an early, comedic version of the same anxiety. Finn becomes smarter, gains glasses and intelligence, becomes a different and more capable version of himself, and nearly destroys everything because the improved Finn is not actually a better Finn, just a replacement Finn who has lost what made the original worth keeping. The episode is light. The anxiety underneath it is not. It is the same question that haunts Fern and Braco and Bravo and Chicle and Crunchy. If a better version of you can be made, what happens to the you that exists now? Does the original survive the upgrade? Or does the upgrade quietly bury the thing it improved? The Vault, Season 5, Episode 34, brings the idea of the discarded self into Finn's own history in a way that reframes the entire series. The episode reveals that Finn has had past lives, earlier incarnations, and one of them is a character called Shoko, a thief in the distant past whose story ends in betrayal and death. Finn carries the buried memory of Shoko inside him, a forgotten self, a previous version that the current Finn has overwritten simply by being born after her. Finn is not exempt from the replacement machine. He is a product of it. Every life he lives is built on the forgotten remains of a life he lived before. He is, himself, a stack of discarded selves wearing the most recent one. Think about what that does to the whole show. Finn, the hero, the protagonist, the one character you assume is solid and singular and irreplaceable, turns out to be exactly as layered and overwritten as the candy people he walks past. He has buried versions. He has discarded selves. He has a Fern. He has a Shoko. The replacement machine does not have an exception for the main character. It runs all the way up. And once you see that, the numbered candy people in the background stop looking like a different category of being from Finn. They start looking like the same thing at a different scale, live stacked on forgotten lives, the present version standing on everything it replaced. Not every forgotten character is forgotten through violence or transformation. Some are simply not followed. The Pajama War, Season 6, Episode 23, is a small Princess Bubblegum and Finn episode, a light caper about a sleepover and a stolen object. It introduces and uses background candy people as texture, gives them small comedic moments, and then lets them dissolve back into the kingdom. This is the ordinary, undramatic way most characters in OO are forgotten, not erased, not consumed, just not pursued. The camera moves on. The story goes elsewhere, and a character who had a name and a moment and a line becomes, again, part of the crowd, available to be pulled forward later, or, far more likely, never seen clearly again. Donnie, Season 1, Episode 21, is one of the earliest examples of a character built up and dropped. Donnie is a grass ogre, a bully whose obnoxious behavior turns out to be the thing protecting a town from a worse threat, the House Hunters. The episode gives him an arc, a reversal, a function in the ecosystem, and then Donnie is essentially never relevant again. He served his episode. He made his point about how the thing that seems purely destructive can be load-bearing, and then the show, having extracted his meaning, set him down and walked away. Donnie is not a tragedy the way Fern is, but he is part of the same accumulation. One more character introduced with intent and quietly retired once his purpose was spent. The Duke of Nuts, from The Duke, Season 1, Episode 19, follows the same shape. A candy noble accused of a crime, given a personality and a household and a daughter, used to teach Finn a lesson about honesty and blame, and then folded back into the background of the Candy Kingdom, appearing here and there as a face but never again as a focus. The early seasons of Adventure Time are full of these, characters who feel, in their single episode, like they might become recurring fixtures, and who instead become part of the deep bench of Ooh, the enormous cast of the once important. The show built a world too big to follow everyone in it, and the evidence of that is the crowd of characters who each had exactly one turn in the light. And here is the thing about that crowd. It is not a failure of the show. It is the texture of a real place. Worlds that feel alive precisely because they contain more lives than the story can possibly track. A kingdom where every face had an arc would not feel like a kingdom. It would feel like a stage with exactly enough actors. The forgotten characters of Adventure Time are the proof that Ooh is bigger than its plot, that it keeps existing in the corners of the frame, that the lives there continue whether or not the camera ever comes back. The cost of a living world is a population of the forgotten. You cannot have one without the other. James, Season 5, Episode 42, weaponizes exactly this. James is a candy person, a banana guard adjacent figure, eager and loyal and desperate to be useful to Princess Bubblegum. In the episode, the group is trapped, and escape requires a sacrifice, and Bubblegum makes a decision that should stop you cold. She has James sacrifice himself to save the others. And then, back in the Candy Kingdom, she reveals that she has cloned him. There is a new James now, an identical copy, with the same eagerness and the same loyalty, who does not remember dying because he did not die. The original James died. The James who exists now is a replacement printed from the same template. James II, Season 6, Episode 3, follows the clone James and turns the screw. The clone, learning what happened to his original, learning that he is a copy of a person who was used up and replaced, has to live with the knowledge that his eagerness to serve Bubblegum is the exact quality that got the first James killed. The show makes a whole small tragedy out of a background character discovering he is a replacement. James is not Fern, he does not get a finale, but he is the same idea in a minor key, a candy person who learns that in this kingdom, your usefulness is the thing that makes you expendable, and your loyalty is the thing that gets you printed again after you die for it. Stop and notice what Princess Bubblegum has done across all of these. She reverted Chicle into Crunchy. She built Goliad and then Stormo. She built Lemongrab and then a second Lemongrab. She cloned James after sending the original to die. The ruler of the Candy Kingdom is the single greatest producer of forgotten and replaced characters in the entire show, and the show frames her, for most of its run, as a hero. That tension is not an accident. Adventure Time wants you to love Bubblegum and to slowly understand that her love for her people is the love of a maker for her materials. She does not value them less than a normal ruler. She values them differently, as things she can always make more of, and that difference is the source of every grave in the cemetery. The show finally interrogates her directly in Bonnibel Bubblegum, the same origin episode that explains Chicle. We see young Bubblegum, freshly conscious, lonely, making a family because she cannot bear to be the only one of her kind. And the cruelty that follows, the betrayal, the dum-dum juice, the reversions, all of it grows from that original loneliness. She made people so she would not be alone, and when the people she made turned on her, she unmade them, and she has been unmaking and remaking people ever since. The cemetery of replacements has a first cause, and it is a child who could create life and could not create a guarantee that the life she created would love her back. So she kept the power to revise. Gumbaldia, Season 10, Episode 12, and the run into the finale bring Gumball back. The Uncle Bubblegum, turned into a harmless punch bowl, is restored to his old self, his memory and ambition returned, and he immediately resumes his war against her. And here the show makes its sharpest point about reversion and replacement. The simplified, forgotten version of Gumball, the punch bowl, was not a different person. It was the same person with the self switched off. When the self comes back, the grudge comes back, the schemes come back, the whole buried interior comes back intact. Reversion did not destroy Gumball, it only stored him. And that is the quiet horror underneath Crunchy, underneath every reverted candy person. The self that was poured out is not gone. It is shelved. It is waiting. The forgotten are not erased. They are filed. Let that sit for a second, because it changes how you should hear the word forgotten for the rest of this video. To be forgotten in Ooh is not to be deleted. It is to be set down. The numbered candy person is not non-existent. He is unwitnessed. Crunchy is not chickly erased. He is chickly stored. Susan Strong is not gone. She is shelved. The discarded self does not vanish. It waits, like Fern, like the buried Choco, like the punch bowl that used to be Gumball, for the moment someone picks it back up. The cemetery of replacements is less a graveyard than a warehouse. The lights are off. The shapes are still in there. And every so often, the show walks back in and turns a single light on, and you remember that the dark was full of people the whole time. This is why the vault matters so much to the architecture of the show. It establishes that the warehouse goes all the way back, that even Finn is built on stored selves. Shoko is in there. The previous incarnations are in there. The show suggests that the spirit that becomes Finn has worn many forms, each one set down when the next one was needed. Finn's whole heroic identity, the thing the series is named around, is just the currently illuminated version of a long line of shelved selves. He is not the hero of Ooh because he is singular. He is the hero of Ooh because he is the one that light happens to be on. And the cruelest, most beautiful version of the warehouse is the one the show puts at its emotional center, which is memory itself. I Remember You, Season 4, Episode 25, aired October 15th, 2012. The Ice King, who was once a man named Simon Petrikov, visits Marceline for help writing songs, and across the episode, you learn that the Ice King and Marceline have a shared past he can no longer access. Simon protected Marceline when she was a child after the Mushroom War. The crown that gives the Ice King his power has slowly erased his memory of who he was and who she is. Simon Petrikov is not dead. He is stored somewhere inside the Ice King, behind a wall of forgetting that the crown keeps building higher. The episode ends with one of the most precise images of the forgotten self the show ever produced. The Ice King and Marceline sing a song built from a note Simon wrote to Marceline before the crown took him. A note begging her to remember that he was a good person before he became this, asking her to forgive him for the version of himself he could feel himself becoming. The Ice King sings the words without understanding them. He performs Simon's grief while being the very thing that buried Simon. The forgotten man is right there, his exact words in the mouth of the creature that replaced him, and he cannot reach the surface. Marceline remembers him. He cannot remember himself. That gap between the self that is stored and the self that is present is the whole tragedy of the Ice King. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Simon and Marcy, Season 5, Episode 14, aired March 25th, 2013, and it is the storyboard Rebecca Sugar finished before leaving the show to make Steven Universe. It shows you Simon while he was still mostly himself, protecting a child Marceline in the ruins of a city after the Mushroom War, putting on the crown when he needed its power, and feeling it take a little more of him each time. You watch the replacement happen in slow motion. Every time Simon uses the crown to save Marcy, he loses more of the man who is saving her. He is trading himself away in pieces to protect the one person who will remember the trade. By the time the show meets the Ice King in the present, the trade is nearly complete. Simon is almost entirely shelved, and the Ice King is almost entirely what is left. What makes Simon the deepest forgotten character in the show is that he is forgotten from the inside out. Chica was reverted by someone else. Fern was discarded by circumstance. But Simon erases himself, willingly, knowingly, choosing each time to lose a little more of who he is, because the alternative is letting Marcy come to harm. He is the rare forgotten character who consents to his own forgetting, and the show treats that consent as the most heroic thing in its entire run. The man chooses to become the joke, the silly Ice King, the kidnapper of princesses, the figure nobody takes seriously, because the cost of staying himself was a child's life. He files himself away on purpose. That is not the replacement machine grinding someone down. That is a person feeding himself into it to save someone else. Broke His Crown, Season 8, Episode 1, and the later episodes that deal with Simon and Betty extend the warehouse metaphor to its limit. The show keeps suggesting that Simon is recoverable, that the stored self can be retrieved, that the right combination of magic and love might turn the light back on inside the Ice King. Betty, Simon's fiancée from before the war, dedicates herself to bringing him back, and the lengths she goes to, the sacrifices she makes, become their own tragedy. The possibility of unforgetting, of restoring a shelved self, is dangled across seasons. And the show is honest about how hard it is. You do not simply remember someone back into existence. The forgetting has weight. The stored self is buried under real time and real loss, and digging it out costs something close to everything. In the finale, briefly, the crown comes off, and Simon is restored, and for a moment the forgotten man stands in his own body again, lucid, himself, after 1,000 years of being shelved inside a creature that wore his face. It is one of the most cathartic beats in the series, and it works because the show spent 8 seasons establishing exactly what was lost. The forgotten can come back. That is the hope the show holds out at the very end. The warehouse can be opened, the stored self can be retrieved, but only sometimes, only with enormous cost, and only for some. For every Simon who gets one shining moment of restoration, there are 1,000 numbered candy people whose lights never come on, a Crunchy who will never be Chickley again, a James who will never be the first James, a Fern who only gets to be himself in the act of dying. So we arrive at the shape of the whole thing. Adventure Time is a show about a world that solved the problem of mortality by making life cheap, and then spent 10 seasons quietly documenting the cost of that solution. Princess Bubblegum can make people out of candy, so Ooh never runs out of people. And because it never runs out of people, no person is irreplaceable. And because no person is irreplaceable, the world fills with the forgotten, the reverted, the cloned, the shelved, the discarded, the numbered. The cemetery is not a dark corner of the show. It is the foundation the Bright Kingdom is built on. And it all comes back to Crunchy, standing in the aura visualizer in You Made Me, cheerful and empty, a person with the person poured out. He is the show's whole argument in a single background figure. He used to be someone. He used to be Chickley, with schemes and a self and a place in a family. Now he is a brown candy ball who toasts at the tavern and stands in crowds and exists as the new cinnamon bun, a stand-in for a stand-in, a replacement occupying a role that was always going to be filled by somebody. The show never tells you to feel sad about Crunchy. It never adds music. It never holds on his face. It just lets him be cheerful in the background, which is, when you finally understand what he is, the saddest thing it could possibly do. Think about what it means that the show withholds the grief. With Simon, the show grieves openly. It gives him songs and a finale, and Betty's devotion and a moment of restoration. Simon is allowed to be mourned because Simon is a main character, a self the show decided was worth the light. Crunchy gets none of that. Crunchy gets cheerfulness and a tavern toast and silence. And the difference between how the show treats Simon and how it treats Crunchy is the difference between the forgotten the story remembers and the forgotten the story does not. They are the same kind of loss. One just happens to a face the camera loves, and the other happens to a face the camera filed in the background of a kingdom too big to mourn everyone in. That is the door Reboot opens and the finale closes. Fern, the discarded self, spends his whole existence furious at being the version that did not get to be real, and at the very end he is granted one moment of being witnessed, one act that is his own, and then a small tree grows from what is left of him. The discarded self gets a grave that is also a seed. It is the most generous thing the show can offer the forgotten. Not restoration, not the light turned back on, but the suggestion that even the leftover, even the copy, even the version that arrived too late, can become the ground something new grows out of. The cemetery of replacements is, in the end, also a garden. The forgotten become the soil, and out of the soil, the show keeps making more. There is a moment near the beginning of the series that contains the entire thesis in miniature, and almost nobody thinks of it as a tragedy. What is Life is Season 1, Episode 15. Finn wants to build a robot to prank Jake, fails, gets frustrated, and throws the broken pile of junk out into the rain. Lightning strikes it. The junk comes alive. It calls itself Nepiya, the never-ending pie throwing robot, and it looks up at Finn with the open, total devotion of a newborn looking at the first face it sees, and it asks, in its small mechanical way, what its purpose is. Finn made a thing to throw pies at his brother. What he made instead was a child. Nepeta is assembled from an electric oven, a soup can, a circuit board, wires, a tuning fork, and small tank treads. He is, materially, trash that got lucky with the weather. And he's also, immediately and undeniably, a person, with a need to be loved and a desperate desire to know why he exists. The episode is light. It plays his neediness for comedy. But the question Inepita asks is the literal title of the episode, what is life? And the show poses it through a creature made of garbage by a teenager who was not even trying to make a creature. Life in Ooo is that easy to produce. It happens by accident, in the rain, out of junk. And anything that easy to produce is going to be that easy to forget. And forget him they do. Nephitia returns in Hot to the Touch, Season 4, Episode 1, and the show drops a line so casually cruel that it is easy to miss what it is admitting. Nephitia has been hiding. He has been waiting, alone, in a game of hide and seek for 15 months, 4 days, and 9 hours. Finn and Jake started a game and forgot they were playing it. They forgot Nephitia existed. And Nephitia, being what he is, did not conclude that he had been abandoned. He concluded that he was winning. He stayed hidden for over a year, faithful to a game the other players had walked away from, because the alternative that the people who made him simply stop thinking about him was not a thought his small devoted circuitry could hold. Sit with that number. 15 months. The creature Finn made, the child who asked what its purpose was, spent 15 months alone in the dark, certain that its makers were still thinking about it. That is the experience of being forgotten in Ooo rendered with perfect, terrible clarity. The forgotten do not always know they are forgotten. Sometimes they wait, loyal and patient, inside a game that ended for everyone else a year ago. Nephitia is not reverted like Chiclee or consumed like the second lemon grab. He is something quieter. He is left running. The lights stay on inside him the whole time, and there is nobody left in the room to see them. The show built an entire other accidental child it almost never uses. In What Have You Done, Season 1, Episode 24, and across scattered appearances, the Ice King keeps Gunter. And Gunter is the most forgotten kind of character there is, the one hiding in plain sight as a joke. For most of the series, Gunter is the Ice King's penguin, a waddling, screeching piece of comic relief, a pet, a sight gag. The show trains you for years to see Gunter as nothing, as furniture with a beak, as the least important recurring figure in the entire cast. And that training is the setup for one of the show's best buried reveals. Orgolog is Season 6, Episode 40. The episode opens with penguins pranking the Ice King, exactly the kind of low comedy Gunter has always lived in. And then the visions start. A purple comet, a head injury, a green brain swelling atop Gunter's body. And the show reveals that Gunter, the penguin, the joke, the pet, is in fact Orgolog, an ancient cosmic entity once feared across the solar system as the breaker of worlds. Orgolog ruled with cruelty until the deity, Grob Gob Glob Grod, struck him down with a sword and cast him to earth, where his power was compressed into a small, waddling, harmless form. Gunter is not a pet. Gunter is a god, shelved, a world breaker, reverted by a sword into a screeching penguin, living for years as comic relief, while the immense buried self waits underneath for a comet to wake it. Think about what the show has done to you with Gunter, because it is the same move it makes with every forgotten character, just scaled up to the cosmos. It taught you to overlook a character. It told you, through hundreds of small comic beats, that this one did not matter, that this one was background, that this one was safe to forget. And then it revealed that the thing you were trained to ignore was a god in storage. Gunter is the warehouse principle written across the sky. The forgotten are not gone. They are compressed. The most insignificant figure in the room can be the most significant being in the solar system, waiting in a smaller shape for the moment the light comes back on. You spent 6 seasons forgetting a penguin. The penguin was the breaker of worlds the entire time. Hot Diggity Doom and the Comet, the 2-part Season 6 finale that aired in March 2015, let Orgolog fully emerge. Gunter, his memory of being Orgolog restored, manipulates a Candy Kingdom election and then ascends into space to meet the comet, shedding the penguin form and growing into a titanic devourer. The stored self is unstored, the compression reverses, and for a moment the show lets you watch a forgotten thing become enormous, the joke unfolding into the apocalypse it always secretly was. It is the inverse of Crunchy. Crunchy is a self poured out and left empty. Orgolog is a self compressed down and left waiting. Both are the same machine. One shelving runs toward emptiness, the other toward a god in a box. Neither self was ever actually destroyed. They were only changed in size. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The humans deserve their own section because they are an entire forgotten people, not just a forgotten character. When Finn meets Susan Strong, he meets a whole tribe living underground, and the show keeps them as a recurring loose end for seasons. They are descendants of humans, or things that they believe they are descendants of humans, mutated and hidden and clinging to an identity that may not be true. They represent, collectively, the largest answer to Finn's loneliness the show ever offers, an entire community of maybe humans, and the series mostly leaves them underground, brought up occasionally, and then set back down. In the 8th season, the Islands miniseries finally goes looking for the humans, and the answer it finds is itself a story about forgetting. The Invitation, Season 8, Episode 20, begins a journey that takes Finn across the ocean to find where the humans went. And what he discovers, across the 8 episodes of Islands, is that the humans survive by hiding, by walling themselves off from the world, by choosing to forget that Ooo and its dangers and its wonders even exist. The humans of Adventure Time did not die. They retreated into a controlled, sealed simulation of safety, and in doing so, they forgot the world and let the world forget them. An entire species filed itself away. Min and Marty, Season 8, Episode 25, delivers the most personal version of this, because it reveals what happened to Finn's own mother and father. Finn learns that his mother, Minerva, became the guardian of the human island, uploading copies of her consciousness to watch over the survivors, while his father, Martin, fled. Finn's origin is a story of people who were left behind and people who did the leaving. His mother stayed and became a system, distributed, copied, a consciousness running on infrastructure rather than living in a body. His father abandoned everyone, including, eventually, Finn himself. The forgetting in Finn's family is not metaphorical. It is the literal mechanism of his existence. He grew up not knowing either of them because both of them, in different ways, were filed away from his life before he could remember. This is the wound Wake Up, Season 6, Episode 1, finally presses on. Finn meets his father Martin in the Crystal Citadel, and Martin does not recognize him. The single most important reunion in Finn's life, the meeting with the parent he never knew, and the parent looks at him as a stranger. Martin is not cursed. He is not reverted. He has simply forgotten his son the ordinary way a self-absorbed person forgets anything inconvenient, by never holding on to it in the first place. Finn spends the scene being the forgotten one, the discarded child of a man who treated him the way the Candy Kingdom treats a numbered citizen, as someone there was always going to be more of, as someone not worth the storage. Escape from the Citadel, Season 6, Episode 2, ends with Finn losing his arm trying to stop Martin from escaping, and there is no music under the final scene. The show strips it out. Finn floats in the water, his arm gone, a flower beginning to grow from the wound, and Jake asks if he is okay, and Finn does not answer. The show does not tell you how to feel. And the thing that makes the scene land is everything we have been building toward. Finn just learned that to his own father, he was forgettable. The arm is the smaller loss. The larger one is the confirmation that even the protagonist, even the hero the whole show is named around, can be the forgotten character in someone else's story. Martin filed Finn away. The cemetery of replacements does not stop at the Candy Kingdom's walls. It runs through the hero's own blood. And out of that wound grows the grass sword, and out of the grass sword grows Fern, and so the forgotten son becomes, in time, the maker of his own forgotten self. Finn, abandoned by Martin, discarded by his own father, goes on to discard a version of himself so completely that it crawls back as a separate person and spends its whole life grieving. The pattern moves through the generations exactly the way it moves through the Candy Kingdom. The forgotten learn to forget. The replaced become replacers. Martin forgets Finn. Finn discards the self that becomes Fern. And somewhere, a seed of a new Finn sword is already growing in the soil of the last one. It never stops. It was never going to stop. Even the heroes of the previous age get this treatment. Billy, the greatest warrior in Ooo, the legendary hero Finn idolizes, is killed off and then, in Billy's bucket list, Season 5, Episode 52, reduced to a list of unfinished errands. The great hero of the last generation becomes a posthumous to-do list that Finn works through out of love. The show is gentle about it, but the structure is the same. Yesterday's irreplaceable legend is today's set of loose ends. Billy was the Finn of his era, the one the light was on. And then the light moved to Finn, and Billy became a memory, then a ghost, then a list. The hero slot, like the cinnamon bun slot, is just a slot. It gets vacated. Someone new has moved in. The previous occupant becomes something you visit. The Lich, Season 4, Episode 26, gives you the dark mirror of the replacement machine, the one being in Ooo, whose entire purpose is to empty the warehouse permanently. The Lich does not revert or shelve or compress. The Lich seeks the end of all life, the final forgetting from which nothing can be retrieved. And the show is careful to make the Lich a wearer of bodies, a thing that possesses and discards hosts, that inhabits a snail in the background of nearly every episode, hidden in plain sight the way Günther hid his godhood. The Lich is the cemetery of replacements imagined as a will, a being that wants what the machine does by accident, total and irreversible erasure. And the horror of the Lich is that he is only making explicit and final what the Bright Kingdom does casually and constantly. That is the connection the show never states, but builds on purpose. Princess Bubblegum and the Lich are the two poles of the same idea. Bubblegum makes life endlessly and therefore makes it cheap, fills the world with the replaceable. The Lich wants to end all of it at once. One pole produces the forgotten by overproducing the living. The other wants to forget everything permanently, and Finn stands between them, himself a stack of forgotten selves, the discarded son of a careless father, the maker of a grieving copy, trying to hold on to a world that both creates and erases people faster than anyone can mourn. The forgotten characters are not a side theme. They are the entire battlefield the show is fought on. Even Marceline, the character who remembers everything, is defined by who she has lost to forgetting. Is That You? Season 6, Episode 19, and the larger arc around Prismo play with death and restoration, and the question of whether a brought-back self is the same self. But Marceline's deepest grief is Simon, the man who saved her and then forgot her over 1,000 years. Marceline is the show's designated rememberer, the one who holds on to the people the world lets slip. And her tragedy is that remembering is not the same as keeping. She remembers Simon perfectly. It does not bring Simon back. She is the proof that even perfect memory cannot defeat the warehouse. You can refuse to forget someone and still lose them to the shelving. Still watch the light go out behind their eyes while you stand there, remembering for both of you. Return to the Banana Guards, because they are the purest expression of the replacement machine the show has, and they are standing in the background of almost every Candy Kingdom scene. The Banana Guards are candy people who guard Princess Bubblegum, and they are notoriously, structurally incompetent. They always appear in pairs early on, and then the Thin Yellow Line, Season 7, Episode 26, reveals that there is a whole force of them, an entire population of identical yellow figures in identical banana peel armor, with nearly identical voices, impossible to tell apart. They are not individuals who happen to be similar. They are a mass produced to be indistinguishable. The Banana Guard is not a character. The Banana Guard is a quantity, and the show knows exactly what it built. The Thin Yellow Line is about the Banana Guards as a police force, about their incompetence, about what it means to have a security apparatus made of interchangeable, disposable, gullible units. You cannot mourn a Banana Guard because you cannot find a Banana Guard to mourn. There is no first one, no real one, no original behind the copies. There is just the supply. When one goes down, the frame still has 6 more exactly like it, and the show has trained you so thoroughly to see them as a yellow blur that a Banana Guard dying does not even register as a death. It registers as a unit being expended. That is the point. Bubblegum built a class of citizens specifically engineered to be beneath grief. Princess Cookie, Season 4, Episode 13, uses the Banana Guards as the disposable muscle of a hostage situation, and the show lets you feel how little anyone weighs them. They are obstacles, comic and replaceable, bodies for the plot to move through. And the deeper you look at the Candy Kingdom, the clearer it becomes that this is a kingdom organized into tiers of forgettability. At the top, the named and witnessed, Bubblegum, the principals. In the middle, the minor citizens with a name and an episode, Root Beer Guy, Starchy, Crunchy. At the bottom, the Banana Guards and the numbered candy people, the pure supply, the citizens who exist to fill space and absorb consequences. Bubblegum did not just make people. She made a hierarchy of how much each person is allowed to matter. And then there is Rattleballs, which may be the single most important episode for everything this video is arguing, and which almost nobody lists among the show's heavy hitters. Rattleballs is Season 5, Episode 46, the 150th episode overall. It reveals a buried piece of Candy Kingdom history. Before the show began, Princess Bubblegum was dissatisfied with the incompetent Banana Guards, so she did what she always does. She made replacements. She created an elite force of gumball robots. The Rattleballs units, lethal and precise and perfect at protecting the kingdom. They were everything the Banana Guards were not. They worked. And because they worked, because they were ruthless and loved violence, Bubblegum became afraid of what she had made. So she made a decision that should permanently change how you see her. She ordered the entire Rattleballs force to gather in a factory under the pretense of routine assembly, and she had them destroyed. All of them. An entire population of conscious, functioning beings she created, lured into one building and scrapped without their knowledge because their maker had decided they were a mistake. This is not Goliad. One failed heir neutralized. This is a mass unmaking. Bubblegum manufactured a class of life, found it inconvenient, and quietly liquidated the whole class. One survived. Through sheer willpower, a single Rattleballs unit overcame his programming, understood what was about to happen, and escaped to the junkyard, where he lived for years in hiding among the discarded, a survivor of his own kind's extermination. The junkyard, the place broken things go, is where the one self that refused to be unmade chose to live, surrounded by the trash that Neptar was made from, hiding in the literal landscape of the forgotten. And the episode's quiet devastation is that Rattleballs does not hate Bubblegum for it. When he finally faces her again, he tells her he still serves her 100%, even if serving her means his own destruction. The being she tried to exterminate offers her his loyalty and his life. Bubblegum spares him, secretly, and stages a fake execution to satisfy the banana guards, giving them a metal cube she claims is the crushed remains of Rattleballs. So the episode ends with a forgotten survivor of a forgotten massacre being allowed to exist only as a secret, protecting the kingdom from the shadows, his entire species reduced to one hidden unit and a fake death prop. Think about everything stacked in that ending. A whole created people, gone. One survivor, spared on the condition that he stays invisible. A fake corpse, manufactured to close the story for the witnesses who never knew the real story. The Candy Kingdom does not just forget its dead. It manufactures evidence of deaths that did not happen and hides the survivors of deaths that did. Sit with what Rattleballs tells you about the architect of this whole world. Princess Bubblegum is, by the show's own buried history, responsible for an industrial extermination of her own creations. Not a tragic accident, a planned, executed liquidation, justified by the maker's discomfort with what she made. And the show still wants you to love her, still frames her as the wise, burdened ruler doing hard things for the good of her people. That tension is the most honest thing Adventure Time ever does. It refuses to let you off the hook. It says, here is a woman who creates life as easily as breathing, who therefore destroys it as easily as breathing, and who you are going to love anyway. And your love for her is itself a demonstration of how the cheapness of life becomes invisible to the people who benefit from it. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The Candy Kingdom is not the only place in Ooo that runs on disposable subjects. And Loyalty to the King, Season 2, Episode 3, shows you the same machine in a different costume. The Ice King, lonely and rejected, uses a magic crown power to make the penguins, and briefly other figures, love and obey him, manufacturing loyalty the way Bubblegum manufactures citizens. The Ice King cannot get anyone to stay, so he makes beings whose feelings are forced. It is pathetic and it is funny, and underneath it is exactly the same hunger that made young Bubblegum build a family out of candy. Both of them are lonely makers. Both of them produce the company they cannot earn. And the produced company, the penguins, the candy people, are loved precisely as much as manufactured things are loved, which is to say, conditionally, and only while they remain convenient. The Silent King, Season 2, Episode 14, gives you a kingdom of goblins who will follow literally whoever sits on the throne, and Finn, having taken the crown by accident, discovers that the role is everything, and the person is nothing. The goblins do not love their king, they love the throne, and whoever happens to fill it. Finn could leave, and a stone could rule, and the goblins would serve the stone. It is the cinnamon bun problem again, the banana guard problem again, the slot outliving the occupant. The show keeps building kingdoms whose subjects are loyal to functions rather than people, because that is the kind of kingdom a world of cheap, replaceable life produces. When anyone can be replaced, loyalty attaches to the chair, not the body in it. Lemon Hope, the two-part 5th season finale that runs across episodes 50 and 51, is the show's longest meditation on what a manufactured being owes the maker who made him to be used. Lemon Hope is a lemon child, created in the misery of Lemongrab's castle, the product of the same desperate life generation that produced all the suffering lemon people. He is prophesied to free his people, burdened from birth with a purpose he did not choose, made to be a savior the way Goliad was made to be an heir. And what Lemon Hope wants, more than anything, is to not be that. He wants to be free of the obligation that his existence was manufactured to fulfill. He wants to walk away from the people he was built to save. And the show, remarkably, lets him. Lemonhope leaves. He goes off into the world and lives for himself and refuses the role he was made for. And the show does not punish him for it the way you expect. He eventually returns on his own terms and does help, but the journey is about a created being asserting that being made for a purpose does not obligate you to that purpose, that you can refuse the function you were generated to perform. Lemonhope is the one manufactured character who gets to argue with the machine, who looks at the slot he was made to fill and says no. He is the exception that defines everything around him, because the tragedy of every other forgotten character is precisely that they never got to refuse. Chicory did not get to refuse becoming Crunchy. The Rattleballs units did not get to refuse the factory. Lemonhope refuses, and in refusing, he shows you what was taken from all the others. That is the quiet moral center underneath all the candy and color. The forgotten characters of OO are forgotten not because they lack inner lives, but because they were never granted the standing to refuse their own disposal. They were made to fill a slot. And a thing made to fill a slot does not get a vote on whether it gets emptied. Lemonhope votes. Rattleballs, in his way, votes by surviving the factory through pure will. Nepeta cannot vote, so he waits 15 months in a game nobody is playing. Crunchy cannot vote, so he toasts cheerfully in a tavern with the self poured out of him. The difference between the forgotten the show pities and the forgotten the show celebrates is whether they ever got to say no to the machine that made them. Even the smallest background gags carry this. Gold Stars, Season 6, Episode 26, and the run of episodes featuring the Lemon People and the Earl's descendants keep showing you populations generated in misery and then largely dropped from the narrative. The Lemon People are an entire manufactured underclass, born screaming from castle walls, and the show uses them for a few arcs and then mostly lets them recede. They are a people the show created, on screen, through Lemongrab's desperation, and then a people the show forgot. The way OO forgets everyone, it does not have room to follow. An entire civilization of the discarded, generated, and shelved, the cemetery of replacements expanded from individuals to whole populations. The show puts its most beloved character through this machine too, and almost nobody notices because it is wrapped in the most charming episode imaginable. Be More is Season 5, Episode 28, the 132nd episode overall. BMO malfunctions, and Finn and Jake disguise themselves to infiltrate the MO factory and save him. And inside that factory, the show quietly tells you what BMO is. BMO is a Mo, one model in a series of robots mass-produced at MO Company by a creator named Mo. There is not one BMO. There is a whole assembly line of MOs, identical machines stamped out for function, of which BMO is a single unit that happened to wander off into the world. Think about what that does to BMO retroactively. The little living game console you have loved for 5 seasons, the one with the songs and the dreams and the imaginary friends and the whole rich interior life, is, by manufacture, one of many, mass-produced, a product. And the factory is full of the others, the MOs who did not wander off, who stayed in their function, who are exactly as capable of an interior life as BMO, and was simply never witnessed the way BMO was witnessed, because BMO got lucky and got a family and got a camera pointed at him. Every MO on that assembly line is a BMO who was never adopted. The factory is a warehouse of unloved BMOs, and the show makes it more pointed than that. Mo, the creator, explains that he built BMO to take care of the son he never had, and then, having no son, he sent BMO out into the world alone to find a family of its own. BMO was made for a slot, the caretaker of a child, and when the slot turned out not to exist, BMO was released, surplus, a being manufactured for a purpose that evaporated before he could fulfill it. BMO is loved by the audience as one of a kind, and the episode lets you feel that, but it also shows you the truth underneath the love. BMO is one of a kind the way any product is one of a kind to the one person who happened to keep it. To the factory, he is a model number, and in the descent through the factory, as Finn and Jake fall through its floors, they pass a room. A dim, red-lit room with a deactivated MO and a small bed marked AMO. The show does not stop on it. It is a single image, glimpsed in passing, and it is the saddest thing in the episode if you catch it. AMO is another MO, a sibling unit, deactivated, kept in a little room with a little bed, switched off and stored. The factory does not destroy its failed units the way Bubblegum destroyed the Rattleballs. It just turns them off and leaves them in their rooms. AMO is the warehouse principle in its purest visual form, a person-shaped thing, made by the same maker who made the character you love, lying dark in a bed, waiting in a room nobody enters, forgotten so completely that the show only lets you see him for a second on the way to somebody else. That is the move the show keeps making, and Be More is the clearest example of it. It takes a character you love unconditionally and shows you, without comment, the assembly line behind him. It does not ruin BMO. BMO is still BMO, still singular to the people who love him, still the warm heart of the Tree Fort, but the show insists that you hold two things at once. BMO is irreplaceable to Finn and Jake, and BMO is, by origin, entirely replaceable. One unit among many, kept by chance, loved by accident of adoption. Those two truths do not cancel, they coexist. And the coexistence is the show's whole understanding of what it means to matter. You are irreplaceable only to whoever happens to be looking. To the factory, to the kingdom, to the world, you are a model number with the lights on. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Magic Man is the show's longest study of reversion as both punishment and mercy, and his arc rewrites everything you thought you understood about him. Sons of Mars is Season 4, Episode 15. Magic Man is introduced as a cruel, chaotic trickster, a Martian who torments people for amusement, and the episode reveals he is being hunted by the Martian deity Grob Gob Glob Grod for crimes against the Martians. You file him, at first, as a villain, a nuisance, a magic-wielding jerk. The show gives you no reason to see him as anything more. He is a recurring antagonist with a cruel streak and a silly name. And then the show fills in the absence behind him. Magic Man was not always Magic Man. He lived a normal life on Mars, with a wife named Margles and a brother who is the deity now hunting him. When the chaos entity Golb attacked Mars, Margles was taken, lost, erased from his life. And the grief of that loss, combined with the magic he wielded, warped him into the cruel, mad creature you met. Magic Man is a forgotten self the same way the Ice King is. Underneath the villain is a widower. Underneath the chaos is a man who lost the person he loved and let the loss rewrite him into something unrecognizable. The cruelty you laughed at is grief wearing a costume. You forgot your floaties. Season 6, Episode 38 performs the reversion. A magical accident strips the magic, the madness, and the sadness out of Magic Man's warped brain all at once, and what is left is the original man underneath, the person he was before the loss broke him. But the reversion takes the magic with it, so he can no longer be Magic Man at all. He takes a new name. Normal Man. He is, like Crunchy, a self with the warping removed, except in his case, the warping was the cruelty and the madness, and removing it does not empty him, it restores him. The same machine that turned Chickley into a cheerful blank turns Magic Man into a sane and gentle person. Reversion in OO is morally neutral. It can scoop out a self and leave a husk, or it can scoop out the damage and leave the person. It depends entirely on what gets defined as the part to remove. Normal Man, Season 8, Episode 7, completes the redemption. The man who was Magic Man, now Normal Man, wants to rescue his brother Glob and apologize for centuries of malevolent buffoonery, and Glob, the deity, passes the mantle of Martian rulership to him. The forgotten self, the normal man buried for centuries under the magic and the madness and the grief, finally surfaces and is given back his life and his throne. It is the redemption arc the Ice King mostly does not get to complete. The warehouse opened and the stored self retrieved whole. And the contrast is the lesson. Two characters, both warped by loss, both buried under the thing the loss made them. One, Magic Man, gets reverted back to himself and redeemed. The other, the Ice King, spends 1,000 years buried and gets only a single shining moment at the very end. The difference is not justice. It is just which stored self the show decided to walk back into the warehouse for. And that arbitrariness is the cruelest and truest part of the whole pattern. The show does not retrieve the forgotten according to who deserves it. It retrieves them according to who it has room for, who the story needs, who the camera happens to love. Magic Man gets his reversion reversed. Simon gets one moment. Cheekle gets nothing. The Rattleballs unit's got a factory. There is no rule. There is no fairness. There is only the limited attention of a story too small to hold every life it contains, turning lights on and off in a warehouse that goes on further than any single video could ever walk. The forgotten are not forgotten because they failed to matter. They are forgotten because mattering was never the thing that determined who got remembered. Marceline understands this better than anyone, which is why her grief attaches to objects. Sky Witch, Season 5, Episode 29, is built around Hambo, a battered stuffed bear that is Marceline's oldest possession, given to her by Simon when she was a child in the ruins after the war. Hambo is the only physical thing that survived from the time when Simon was still Simon. the one object that remembers the version of him that the crown erased. When Hambo is lost, and Marceline goes to extraordinary lengths to get it back, the episode is not about a toy. It is about the last surviving artifact of a forgotten self. Hambo is the proof that Simon existed before the Ice King. It is a memory she can hold in her hands, because the man himself can no longer hold the memory at all. To get Hambo back, Marceline has to trade away something precious, and Princess Bubblegum gives up a shirt Marceline once gave her. A shirt Bubblegum had secretly kept and worn, revealing in a single quiet gesture how much she had held onto. The episode is a chain of people keeping objects, because the people the objects represent cannot be kept. Marceline keeps Hambo because she cannot keep Simon. Bubblegum keeps the shirt because she cannot keep the closeness she and Marceline used to have. The Forgotten leave residue, a bear, a shirt, a note in a song, and the people who refuse to forget spend their lives guarding the residue, because the residue is the only part of the lost self that stays still long enough to hold. Everything Stays, the song that gives its name to the second part of the Stakes miniseries, Season 7, Episode 7, is Marceline's mother's lullaby, and it is the show's gentlest statement on this entire theme. The lyric, sung by a mother Marceline barely remembers, is about how things stay the same in memory even as they change in reality, how the past is held in place precisely because it cannot be revisited. Everything stays right where you left it. Everything stays, but it still changes. That is the whole paradox of the Forgotten in Ooo. The stored self does not change in the warehouse. Chicle is still Chicle in there. Simon is still Simon. They stay exactly where they were set down. And the world outside changes around them until, if they are ever retrieved, they no longer fit the world they return to. Everything stays. And it still changes. Both are true. That is the lullaby a forgotten mother sang to a daughter who would spend 1,000 years remembering everyone else. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Memory of a Memory, Season 3, Episode 3, makes the warehouse literal by putting Finn and Jake inside Marceline's memories, walking through her past as though through rooms. The episode treats memory as a place you can enter, a structure with corridors and stored scenes, and the image is exactly right for everything this video has been describing. Memory in Adventure Time is architecture. It is a building full of shelved selves, past versions, lost people, and you can walk through it, and the people in there are frozen in the moment you last saw them. To remember someone is to keep a room for them. To forget them is to let the room go dark. And the show keeps building episodes that walk you through these dark and lit rooms, insisting that the forgotten are not nowhere. They are in there, in the building, where you left them. Evergreen, Season 6, Episode 24, walks all the way back to the deepest room in the warehouse, the prehistory of the crown itself. It tells the story of an ancient ice wizard named Evergreen and his apprentice Gunther, long before the Mushroom War, long before Simon, and it reveals that the crown that would one day erase Simon was forged in an even older grief and bound up with an even older forgotten self. The crown is a machine for forgetting that is itself the residue of someone forgotten. Layer under layer under layer. Evergreen made the crown made the Ice King. The Ice King buried Simon, and Simon protected Marceline, who keeps the bear, who remembers the mother, who sang the song about how everything stays. The warehouse does not have a bottom. It just keeps going down, every forgotten self resting on an older forgotten self, all the way to the beginning. And at the personal center of it all sits The Vault, Season 5, Episode 34, which we touched on earlier and which deserves to close the argument. Finn discovers Shoko, his own past life, a thief who died betrayed, a self he has been carrying buried inside him the entire series without knowing. The protagonist of Adventure Time is, it turns out, the most layered, forgotten character of all, a being made of stacked previous selves, each one filed away when the next was born. Finn does not stand outside the warehouse looking in. Finn is the warehouse. He is rooms of forgotten selves with the lights mostly off. And the Finn you have been watching is just the room that happens to be illuminated right now. When the show reveals Shoko, it is telling you that the hero is not exempt from the only rule Ooo has. Everyone is somebody's forgotten self. Everyone is a room the light moved on from. There is one forgotten character in Adventure Time who is, quite literally, made entirely of replacements, and her single episode may be the most concentrated version of this video's whole argument. Princess Monster Wife is Season 4, Episode 9. It aired on May 28, 2012. The Ice King, lonely as always, has been stealing body parts from the princesses of Ooo, a nose from one, a leg from another, the pieces he found most beautiful, and he has stitched them together into a companion. He calls her his wife. She is assembled from the discarded and the stolen, a person built out of parts cut from other people, and the show asks you to look at her and understand that she is, despite all of it, a person. Princess Monster Wife is self-aware. She knows what she is. She knows that the side of her makes Finn and Jake faint, that she is patched together from pieces that do not belong to her, that every part of her body was a loss inflicted on someone else. The episode gives her a full interior, self-loathing and gentle and aware, and the Ice King, in his broken way, loves her completely and only wants her to love herself. She is the cemetery of replacements made into a single body. She is what you would get if you took all the stolen pieces of all the forgotten and assembled them into one conscious being, and asked her to live with the knowledge of what she is made of. And how does she resolve her own existence? She gives herself back. Princess Monster Wife returns to each princess the part that was taken from her, undoing herself piece by piece, dismantling her own body to restore the people she was assembled from. She chooses to stop being a single person so that the many people she was made of can be whole again. Her last words, as the only piece left of her floats back to the Ice King, are that she will always be his wife. She unmakes herself out of a kind of grace, and the show treats it as both a tragedy and a mercy. The being made of replacements replaces herself back into the originals. The most assembled character in OO achieves peace only by disassembling. Hold Princess Monster Wife next to Crunchy, and you have the two poles of the whole pattern in two single episode candy-colored figures. Crunchy is a self emptied out and left to walk around cheerful and hollow, the person poured out and the body kept. Princess Monster Wife is a body assembled from the pieces of other selves, a person built up from theft and loss, who chooses to give the pieces back. One is subtraction, one is assembly, and both of them are the show quietly insisting that in OO, a self is not a sacred, indivisible thing. It is parts. It can be poured out, stitched together, taken apart, returned. The person is provisional, the pieces are what persist, and the pieces can always be rearranged into someone new. Goliad returns, briefly, in The Cooler, Season 6, Episode 22, and the show uses the return to show you that Bubblegum has not changed, only gotten better at hiding it. Bubblegum is running a surveillance state, watching her citizens, managing them, and when the political situation requires it, she calls on the psychic Goliad to read minds and enforce order. The failed heir, the abandoned first draft, frozen on a mountaintop, gets pulled back into service as a tool when the kingdom needs one. Even Bubblegum's discarded creations are not truly discarded. They are inventory. Goliad is shelved on a mountaintop until the day Bubblegum needs a mind reader, and then she is retrieved, used, and presumably shelved again. The forgotten in the Candy Kingdom are not gone. They are stored assets, waiting for the maker to have a use for them. And that word, assets, is finally the most honest word for what the citizens of the Candy Kingdom are to the woman who made them. Bubblegum loves her people. The show is clear about that, and it is not a lie. But it is the love of an owner for what she owns, a maker for what she can make more of. And that love is perfectly compatible with surveillance, with experimentation, with mass destruction, with reversion, with cloning the dead and storing the failures. She is not a cruel ruler. She is a ruler for whom cruelty and care are not opposites, because both flow from the same fact. She can always make another one. When you can always make another one, destroying one and loving one feel the same from the inside. They are both just things you do with your materials. All the Little People, Season 5, Episode 5, makes this unbearable and almost never gets discussed, because it is a Finn episode, rather than a Bubblegum one, but it is the same machine handed to a different person. Finn comes into possession of a bag of tiny living figurines, miniature versions of everyone he knows. Marceline, Bubblegum, Jake, all of them, tiny and alive and conscious. And Finn, alone, starts arranging their lives. He pairs them off. He makes the little Finn kiss the little Princess Bubblegum, the little Marceline, experimenting with their relationships like a child with dolls, except the dolls are alive and aware. The episode sits in deep discomfort as Finn plays God with a population of tiny conscious beings, and it ends with him choosing to stop, to put the bag away, to refuse the power. But the show has made its point by then. Given a population of small, replaceable conscious beings, an ordinary good person like Finn will, almost without thinking, begin to arrange them, to treat their lives as a thing he gets to author. The impulse that built the Candy Kingdom is not unique to Bubblegum. It is what anyone does when handed beings small enough and numerous enough to feel replaceable. Finn is horrified at himself and stops. Bubblegum, handed an entire kingdom of such beings, did not stop. She built a civilization on the impulse Finn caught himself indulging for a single afternoon. The little people go back in the bag, forgotten, stored, a whole population of selves reduced to luggage, and the show never returns to them. They are still in there, in the bag, where Finn left them. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The kingdom's relationship to its own dead gets its starkest treatment in the way the show handles bodies as recoverable property. Mortal Recoil, Season 2, Episode 25, ends with Princess Bubblegum destroyed, blown apart, and then reconstituted, regrown, brought back from her own biomass. And the version that comes back is briefly the wrong age, the 13-year-old Bubblegum, because the reconstruction did not recover all of her. Bubblegum dies and is rebuilt from her own candy, and the rebuild is imperfect, and the imperfection is treated as a temporary inconvenience to be corrected as she regrows. She is the queen, and even she is subject to the rule. She is biomass. She can be destroyed and reconstituted. The difference between Bubblegum and a numbered candy citizen is not that she cannot be replaced. It is that she is important enough to be reconstituted carefully, while they are reconstituted, if at all, as a fresh batch. And it was all there from the very first episode. Slumber Party Panic, Season 1, Episode 1, the pilot of the entire series, is about the candy people dying and rising as candy zombies, and Princess Bubblegum's frantic effort to manage a population that has slipped out of her control. The very first story Adventure Time ever told is a story about the citizens of the Candy Kingdom as a mass to be managed, dying and reanimating, a crowd of bodies that Bubblegum must contain. The show announced its real subject in Episode 1 and then spent 10 seasons elaborating it. The Candy People were never individuals to the kingdom. They were a population, a quantity, a mass that could die in numbers and rise in numbers and be managed in numbers. The Forgotten were built into the premise from the first frame. So when you reach the end of Adventure Time and you feel the warmth of it, the bonds, the love, the sense that these characters truly cared for one another, you are feeling something real. And you are also feeling something that exists on top of a foundation the show never let you forget was there. The warmth is real. Finn and Jake love each other. Marceline and Bubblegum love each other. Simon is restored. The bonds the show celebrates are not a lie, but they are bonds formed by the few characters the story kept its lights on, and they float on a sea of characters whose lights went off. The numbered citizens, the reverted cousins, the scrapped robots, the deactivated MOs, the little people in the bag, the discarded selves. The whole quiet population of Ooh that mattered exactly as much and was witnessed exactly as little. Gold stars, the lemon people, the manufactured underclass born in misery and dropped from the narrative are the last thing to hold in your mind, because they are the cemetery at its largest scale. Not one forgotten character, not one reverted cousin. An entire people, generated on screen out of one broken creature's desperation, used for a few stories, and then allowed to recede into the background of a kingdom that already had more citizens than the camera could ever follow. The lemon people are proof that the machine works at every scale. It forgets an individual like Chicle. It forgets a class like the Banana Guards. It forgets an entire civilization like the lemon people. The size does not matter. The mechanism is the same. Make life cheaply, use it, set it down, make more. There is a forgotten character at the very start of the series who quietly predicts the entire pattern, and his name tells you what he is. Henchman is Season 1, Episode 22. Finn becomes the henchman of an undead warrior called the Marauder, doing chores and small cruelties, until he realizes the role is a costume he can take off. The episode is about Finn discovering that being someone's henchman is a slot, not a self, that the function can be filled by anyone and walked away from by anyone. The henchman is the most replaceable role there is, a body that exists to serve and to be discarded, and the show puts Finn inside that role early, so you understand, before you meet a single candy person, that Ooh is a world organized around functions that outlive the people performing them. The Witch's Garden, Season 1, Episode 14, strips Jake of his powers and forces him to confront what he is without the one ability that defines him. And underneath the comedy is the same anxiety that haunts Fern and Bravo and the improved Finn of the real you. Who are you when the thing that made you special is removed? The witch takes Jake's stretching, and Jake spends the episode diminished, ordinary, replaceable, until he recovers what was taken. The show keeps running this experiment on every character it has. Remove the defining trait. See what is left. See whether the person survives the subtraction. Sometimes the answer is yes, the person is more than the function. And sometimes, as with Crunchy, the answer is no. And what is left when you subtract the self is just a cheerful body with the lights on and nobody home. Lady and Peebles, Season 4, Episode 19, sends Lady Rainicorn and Princess Bubblegum to rescue Finn and Jake, and it is one of the few episodes that treats Lady Rainicorn as a full protagonist rather than Jake's beautiful untranslated girlfriend. And that word, untranslated, is the key to how the show forgets Lady Rainicorn in plain sight. She speaks Korean throughout the series, almost never subtitled, and the audience and most of the characters simply do not understand her. She is present in scene after scene, a major character by screen time, and her inner life is sealed behind a language barrier the show chooses not to open. Lady Rainicorn is forgotten not by absence, but by translation, by the show's decision to let her speak, and to let most of her speech go unheard. She's right there, talking, the whole time. You just were not given the means to listen. Lady Rainicorn of the Crystal Dimension, Season 8, Episode 4, finally centers her, gives her a dimension, a context, an interiority the show had withheld for years. And the lateness of it is the point. It takes until the 8th season for the show to fully turn toward a character who had been in nearly every season, because she was filed under supporting, under girlfriend, under the role she occupied, rather than the person she was. Lady Rainicorn is the forgotten character who was never off-screen. She demonstrates that you can be forgotten while fully visible, that forgetting is not about whether the camera sees you, but about whether the story decides you have an inside worth translating. For most of the run, the show decided she did not, and so she spoke 1,000 lines into a silence the audience was never asked to fill. Think about how many kinds of forgetting we have now counted, because the show is far more precise about this than any single word can hold. There is the reversion that empties a self, like chicle into crunchy. There is the consumption that ends one, like the second lemon grab. There is the shelving that suspends one, like Susan Strong or Goliad on her mountain. There is the compression that hides a god in a joke, like Gunter. There is the mass production that drowns the individual in the supply, like the banana guards and the MOs. There is the assembly that builds a person from the pieces of others, like Princess Monster Wife. There is the translation that seals a self behind a language, like Lady Rainicorn. And there is the abandonment that simply stops thinking about someone, like Finn and Jake forgetting Nepta in a game. 8 mechanisms, 1 result, a world full of the unwitnessed. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Daddy's Little Monster, Season 4, Episode 6, hands Marceline the literal crown of her father's realm, the amulet that would make her the new ruler of the Nightosphere, and the episode is about her refusing to become the thing the role would turn her into. Her father, Hunson Abadir, wants a successor, an heir, someone to fill the slot of Nightosphere ruler, and he is willing to let that role consume his daughter to fill it. Marceline puts on the amulet to save Finn, and feels it beginning to remake her, beginning to pour out Marceline and pour in the ruler the slot requires. And she fights it off. She is, like Lemon Hope, one of the rare characters who looks at the inheritance she was bred for and refuses to be replaced by it. Her father sees her as the next occupant of a throne. She insists on remaining herself instead. Jake the Dad, Season 5, Episode 6, gives Jake a litter of puppies, 5 children, and then the show does something quietly remarkable with them. The puppies grow up at the accelerated rate of their Rainicorn dog biology, and within a handful of episodes, they are adults who leave to live their own lives, and then they are largely gone from the show. Jake becomes a father to 5 conscious beings, and the series moves past them almost immediately. The children aging out of the frame, scattering into remembered, occasionally, and centered almost never. Jake's children are forgotten the way real adult children drift from a story that is not about them, but the speed of it. The way they go from birth to absence in a few episodes makes visible how quickly produces lives and then lets them wander out of view. Even the hero's own children are subject to the rule. They are made, they are loved, and then the camera has other places to be. Joshua and Margaret Investigations, Season 6, Episode 16, reaches back to the previous generation, to Jake and Finn's adoptive parents, who are dead before most of the series even begins. Joshua and Margaret are forgotten in the most ordinary way of all, by having lived before the story started and died before the camera arrived. The episode is a flashback, a visit to a lit room in the warehouse that the present-day show keeps dark. And it reveals that the entire premise of Finn and Jake as brothers rests on 2 characters the series almost never shows. 2 parents who made a family and then were gone, remembered through a house and a few artifacts, and the bond they left behind. The whole show stands on the shoulders of 2 forgotten people. Everything Finn and Jake are to each other was built by parents the story filed away before it began. And so it comes back, one final time, to Shoko and the Vault, because Shoko is where the show admits that the protagonist himself is built on this. Finn carries Shoko, a thief from 1,000 years ago, a self-betrayed and dead and buried so deep inside him that he lived his entire life never knowing she was there. When the show reveals her, it is making the quietest and largest claim it ever makes. The hero is not a single person. The hero is the latest in a series. There were Finns before Finn, selves the universe used and set down and used again, and the boy you have followed for 10 seasons is just the current draft, standing on the forgotten remains of every draft before him. Shoko is in there. The others are in there. Finn is a warehouse that walks, lit in exactly one room, and the show spent 10 seasons walking you through the dark rooms of everyone else, so that, by the end, you would understand that he has them too. That is what the Cemetery of Replacements finally means. It is not a sad corner of an otherwise happy show. It is the structure of the whole world, top to bottom, from the numbered candy person in the back of a crowd scene to the protagonist whose soul is a stack of forgotten lives. Ooh can always make another one, of anything, of anyone. And so nothing in Ooh is ever truly the only one of itself. And so everything in Ooh is, at every moment, one replacement away from being set down in the dark. The show knows this. It built it on purpose. And it spent 10 years asking you to love these characters anyway, knowing that your love is exactly the light that decides, for a little while, which of them gets remembered. Consider, before we close, how the show treats the very idea of a successor, because the word successor and the word replacement are the same word said with different feelings. A successor is a replacement you have decided to be sentimental about. Bubblegum builds Goliad as a successor, which is to say a replacement for herself, an heir to step into her slot when she is gone. The Nightosphere wants Marceline as a successor, a replacement for Hunson. The Martian throne passes to Normal Man as a successor to Glob. Over and over. The show stages the making of an heir, and over, the heir is just the next body for a chair that does not care who sits in it. The kindest version of replacement is inheritance. The cruelest version is the Rattleballs factory. They are the same act. The only difference is whether the maker decides to call the new occupant family. And that is why Jake the children, the puppies aging out of the frame, land the way they do. Jake does not build successors. He has children, loves them, and lets them go. And the show treats their departure not as disposal, but as the natural drift of lives that were always going to exceed the story. There is a version of replacement that is not a tragedy, and Jake stumbles into it without theorizing about it. You make a life. You love it while the light is on it. You let it walk out of the frame and live somewhere the camera does not follow, and you do not pretend you can keep it, and you do not destroy it for becoming inconvenient. Jake forgets his children the way a healthy parent forgets, by releasing them, and it is the one form of forgetting in all of Ooh that does not feel like a grave. It feels like a door held open. So the Cemetery of Replacements has, at its edge, a single counterexample, and it is worth ending near it. Most forgetting in Ooh is the warehouse, the dark room, the poured out self, the deactivated body in the little bed. But Jake shows you the other kind, the forgetting that is just love letting go. And the difference between the two is the whole moral weight of the show. To forget someone by emptying them, reverting them, scrapping them, storing them against their will, is the cruelty the kingdom runs on. To forget someone by releasing them into a life larger than your story is the grace the show holds out as the alternative. Same word. Opposite acts. And Adventure Time spends 10 seasons showing you the cruelty so that, when you finally see the grace, you understand exactly what it costs and exactly why it matters. Mystery Train, Season 2, Episode 19, is a small birthday episode that hides a forgotten character inside a magic trick, and it is worth pausing on because of how casually it disposes of a person. Finn and Jake board a train where passengers are vanishing, a murder mystery setup, and the culprit turns out to be the Ice King in disguise, the passengers not dead but stowed away. The episode is light, a birthday gift from Jake to Finn, an elaborate staged adventure. But notice the premise. A train full of characters introduced only so they can disappear. A cast assembled for the express purpose of being made to vanish one by one. The show literally builds an episode whose plot is the orderly removal of a population, and it plays as a present. That is the Candy Kingdom logic in miniature, on a train for a birthday. People made to be removed, and the removal staged as entertainment. And the deeper joke, the one the show does not underline, is that the disappearing passengers were never real to begin with in the way the principals are real. They were extras, generated for the trick, faces with exactly enough presence to be missed when they vanish, and not 1 ounce more. The episode needs a population to make disappear, so it manufactures one, uses it, and discards it when the trick is done. The passengers on the mystery train are the numbered candy people in a different costume, beings called into existence by the story's need for someone to forget, and then forgotten precisely on schedule. The way the kingdom forgets its citizens, the way the factory forgets its MOs, the way Finn and Jake forgot Neptar in a game that ended without him. Even the small magic of Ooh runs on this. Spells that transform, potions that revert, curses that overwrite oneself with another, the grass sword that grows a person out of a discard, the crown that erases a man over 1,000 years. Magic in Adventure Time is, more often than not, a technology of replacement. A way to turn one being into another, to subtract a self and install a new one, to store a person inside a smaller shape or a stranger form. The witches and wizards of Ooh are not casting spells of fire and lightning so much as spells of substitution. The whole magical economy of the show is a set of tools for doing to individuals what bubblegum does to populations. Turn this into that. Pour this out and pour that in. Replace. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Return near the end to a small early episode that quietly rehearses the whole idea in a single guilty choice. City of Thieves, Season 1, Episode 13, drops Finn and Jake into a city where everyone is a thief. And Finn meets a girl named Penny, who appears to be an innocent victim. He champions her, fights for her, becomes furious on her behalf at the city that wronged her. And at the end, the episode reveals that Penny is the greatest thief of all, that she used Finn's righteousness as a tool, that the innocent he was defending was a performance. Penny is forgotten the instant the episode ends, never to return, but the shape of her stays in the show forever. She is the first time Adventure Time tells you that the face you are looking at may be a slot occupied by someone other than who you assumed, that the person can be a costume over a different person entirely. And that is, in the end, the unsettling gift the forgotten characters give you. Once you have seen Crunchy and understood what he used to be, once you have seen the AMO room and the Rattleballs factory and the bag of little people and the deactivated selves stored in dark rooms all across Ooh, you cannot watch a crowd scene in Adventure Time the same way again. Every candy person in the back of the frame becomes a question. Who were you before? What got poured out of you? What slot are you filling that someone else used to fill? The show trained you, slowly, over 10 seasons, to see the warehouse behind the kingdom. And once you see it, the brightness of Ooh acquires a permanent shadow. The color is still there, but now you know what the color is painted over. There is a temptation, with a show this warm, to treat the darkness as a flaw, as something the show stumbled into, as a fan reading imposed from outside. It is not. Adventure Time built the cemetery of replacements deliberately, brick by brick, from the candy zombies of the first episode to the revelation of Shoko, to the deactivated Emo in its little bed. The show is not accidentally about forgetting. It is precisely, patiently, and almost obsessively about forgetting, about manufacture and disposal, about the cheapness of life in a world where life can be poured from a vat, and about the strange grace that becomes possible only once you accept that you, too, are provisional, that you too will be set down, that you too are one of the forgotten in someone else's story, even as you star in your own. And maybe that is why the show is so comforting to fall asleep to, despite all of this, or even because of it. There is a peace in being told that you do not have to be irreplaceable to matter, that mattering was always a thing that happened in the moment someone looked at you, not a permanent property you had to earn and defend. The candy people do not agonize over their replaceability. They toast at the tavern. They guard the castle badly. They live their small, lit lives in the time they have the light. And the show, for all its melancholy, suggests that this is enough, that a brief witnessed life in a world of the forgotten is not a tragedy to be solved, but simply the shape of being alive in Ooh, which is to say, the shape of being alive anywhere. You are here now. The light is on now. That is the whole of it, and it is enough. That is the whole story. A world that can always make another one of you is a world where you will, eventually, be replaced. And the proof of it is everywhere in Ooh, in every numbered citizen and every reverted cousin and every cloned guard and every discarded self that crawled back up wearing a face that used to belong to someone else. To be forgotten in the land of Ooh is not to be deleted. It is to be set down in the dark of a warehouse that goes all the way back to a lonely child who could make people and could not make them stay. And the camera, every so often, turns a single light on and you see that the dark was full of people the entire time, cheerful and empty and waiting, each one a self that was poured out so the world could pour another one in. Chicle is in there, smiling as Crunchy. The Rattleballs units are in there, all but one, scrapped in a factory. AMO is in there, switched off in a little bed. The little people are in there, folded into a bag. Shoko is in there, the oldest version of the hero, resting under all the newer ones. The mystery train passengers are in there, vanished on schedule for a birthday. Lady Rainicorn is in there, talking the whole time in a language nobody translated. And somewhere near the front, where the light reaches, a penguin who is also a god waits patiently for a comet. Proof that the smallest forgotten thing in the room can be the largest thing in the sky. The show never asks you to fix this, because it cannot be fixed. A world that makes life cheap will always produce the forgotten, and the only thing any character ever manages is to turn a light on, for a while, for one of them. Marceline keeps a bear. Finn works through a dead heroes list. Bubblegum spares one robot in secret. Simon trades himself away to keep one child safe. The grace in Adventure Time is never the abolition of forgetting. It is the small, doomed, beautiful act of choosing to remember one person in a world built to forget everyone. That is all any of them can do. That is all any of us can do. And the show, in its quiet way, suggests that it is not nothing. That to be the light someone else is remembered by is the most that love has ever been able to offer, anywhere, in any kingdom, made of candy or otherwise. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.